Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I wish to first thank Muslim Congress for giving me this honor one more time of hosting this town hall, and I'm very excited because the three panelists who are here are very special in their own fields, and I will tell you about them. And or let me start first by in introducing Mr. Scott Ritter, who was born into a military family. He was an intelligence officer and lead analyst for the U.S. Marine Corps. Desert Storm, he worked for General Norman Schwarzkopf, and he challenged his claim that the Scud missile launcher was destroyed. So that set the stage for a career of not following the beaten path. Such. He was a military consultant for Fox News, and he supposedly worked for MI6 also to some extent, had some association over there. I wanted to ask, because many of us know one person over there, if you know him also, his name was Bond, James Bond, if you knew him such. He was the UN Chief Weapons Inspector, and he said that the WMD story in Iraq was just an excuse to attack, and he said that in a war that we cannot win. He spoke about the Israeli lobby, which was pushing Bush into war with Iran, and he said that if that happens, it'll be the worst blood under than Iraq. He recently is just come back from Russia yesterday, after spending a month over there, and he said that Ukraine and not Russia was responsible for the Bucha mass massacre, and he called Biden a war criminal as such. So he's facing some Twitter, being kicked out of Twitter multiple times, which I think is a badge of honor for you, sir. So if you can please come over here, let's welcome him with a round of applause. Please come in. Thank you. Our next guest is Ms. Aisha Juman, and she has about 30 years of experience in public health and has worked for the CDC. She has worked with viral vaccines, has done research on cervical and breast cancer, child and health, nutrition. But the most important thing that she's doing is she is the founder and president of the Yemen Relief Reconstruction Foundation, which does this immense humanitarian projects and work which involve food and water for the Yemeni people, orphan support, and reconstruction in that area. Another very important job of hers is to seek awareness from the U.S. public and the policymakers about the Yemen crisis. And she's an advocate for ending U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. And that's where I know her from. We are in a group together with activists for Yemen. And I learn a lot from her because she doesn't just break down a wall, she chips away and chips away and chips away. And that is something that I'm learning. It is all about strategy and thinking step by step. If you could come over here. Our next guest is Reverend Dr. Fahad Abu-Akel, who was born in Galilee to Palestinian Arab Christian parents. He came to the United States in 1966, and he got his BA from Southern University in Florida. He has a Master of Divinity, Doctor of Ministry in Atlanta, Georgia. He's an ordained Presbyterian minister. He's the first Palestinian to be elected moderator of the Presbyterian Church, and is unapologetic defender of Palestinian rights. And he has said that he is always open for any of us to call him to the mosque, etc., for him to speak. If you could please come over. So the way it works, as you know from the past town halls, that I will ask a question, I will set the stage for it by giving some background for it, ask the question, and we will go through a round each. There'll be 2 questions over there, which will take us through probably an hour, and then it'll be open to the rest of you to ask your questions. Some of you have already posted questions on slido.com. You can still do that. And if not, if you want to just ask during the town hall, you can do so too live. So let's start with Mr. Ritter. Both US and China use imperialistic techniques and diplomacy, but to varying extent. This is how US began. The expansion began from the green portion, you see, is where US began. Then over the next 50 to 60 years, through annexation to accession to wars or purchase, it became the continental United States as we know it, and went beyond that. Alaska was purchased in 1867. In 1898, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Guam, Philippines were all acquired, and Panama in 1904. The First and Second World Wars were an immense source for the U.S. arms manufacturers to succeed. And things should have should have slowed down after World War II, but instead they had tasted blood, and things just went further and further higher after that. And today, United States by far is the highest exporter of arms to the rest of the world, and such. And its U.S. has military presence with 750 bases in about 80 countries as such. So there is also a soft power. The U.S. aid and the unholy trinity, as Richard Peete called it, of the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and the World Trade Organization give you money, but they give you money with preconditions. And that's how you become a friendly country as such. On the other hand, China has taken a different approach in which they have gone towards infrastructure. The Belt and Road Initiative has been a massive undertaking. It involves 100 different countries as such, involves 4.6 billion people, 61% of the entire world's population, and the goal is to lift about 7 million people off the poverty line. And this in blue is the US economy, which is number one in the world, but China, which is number 2, is supposed to overtake it in year 2028. But we cannot forget, with China, you cannot forget the other humanitarian abuses that have taken place, such as the Uyghurs and the massacre of those, the ethnic cleansing of those, and the democratic movement of Hong Kong, which has been oppressed as such. Question to you, Mr. Ritter, is will any U.S. president move away from wars and arms export to a more peaceful diplomatic approach like China is taking by building infrastructure in these countries? And even if there was a president like that, will the military industrial complex allow such a policy to succeed?
Well, first of all, thank you very much.
That's the key to understanding the first part. I mean, Dwight D. Eisenhower, former U.S. president, warned us about the military-industrial complex back in 1960. But anybody who studied the growth of America as a global power, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War, understood that there was a direct connection between America's status as a global dominant power and military industry. We had, of course, the Great Depression prior to the Second World War, and it was the war and the reinvigoration of the American industrial complex that brought us out of this. And so those politicians and industrialists in the post-war environment realized that the only way we could sustain this growth, this prosperity, is by having a perpetual state of war. And this is linked to a slide that you showed up there, and we have to be honest. When we speak of the expansion of America, you miss one aspect of it: manifest destiny. And when I speak about manifest destiny, we're talking about God empowering America to move west and expand itself, which means that in the mindset of the American industrialist, the American political elite, We are anointed by God to be the dominant power in the world. A lot of people don't bring religion into the mix, but it's the truth. That when you look at our coin, in God we trust, but it's not the pure trust and relationship that one would expect from religion. It's the abuse of religion by man to empower America to do things in God's name, but it's not in God's name, it's in America's benefit. And this extends to the Military-Industrial Commission. What we see with the expansion of the American economy, you spoke of the World Bank and such, these are tools of empowerment. We call it the rules-based international order. These are mechanisms designed to sustain American power. And Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about this, about the dominance that this would have on America, the destructive aspect it would have on American democracy. Now we come, will any U.S. president move? How can a U.S. president be elected in an American democracy that's corrupted by the military-industrial complex? How can an American president promote peace when the entire premise of American economic prosperity requires constant global tension? You know, we could make peace with so many nations today. I just came back from a one-month trip to Russia, where I had the opportunity to meet with Russians at every level. And all they want is peaceful coexistence. Back in 2007, I traveled to Iran and had similar conversations with the Iranian people and their leaders. All they want is peaceful coexistence, peaceful cooperation. America can't have that, because to have that kind of peaceful cooperation eliminates the conflict necessary to empower the military-industrial complex to enrich itself in the name of modern manifest destiny. It's no longer about America moving westward. It's about America dominating the globe, where we are the sole hegemon, where we are the only ones who dictate outcomes. But as your slide showed, this model isn't working. It's failing, and it's failing egregiously. The competitors, China. China doesn't bring a manifest destiny type ideology to it. They bring pure economics. And there's some bad stuff attached with economics. Some of the Belts and Roads Initiative involves economic domination, economic exploitation of nations that cannot afford to go into the debt that China offers. But the difference with China and the United States is on occasions where this debt load is too great, China forgives it, renegotiates it without strings. They don't say you have to be like us, you have to think like us, you have to support who we want. They say, oh, this was a bad deal, let's make a better deal for you. I'm not saying China's perfect, but America's supposed to be the top capitalistic nation in the world. The Chinese are doing capitalism better than we do, because we don't do capitalism, we do imperialism. So the short answer is, will any U.S. president move away? No. There's not a president out there right now in the political landscape who can do that, because presidents aren't elected by the people. Presidents are selected by the political elite, by political parties, by corporate money, by special interests. And until we solve that problem, we're not going to get the good leadership, and we're only going to get the bad results. So there's my answer.
Thank you very much. One of the African leaders commented, when the Western leader leaves our country, we are left with a lecture. When a Chinese leader leaves, we are left with a school or a hospital. I think that summarizes what happens. Ms. Juman next. Yemen is in a crisis. It is the worst humanitarian crisis as identified by the UN. But Yemen has multiple players involved right now. The Houthis, who are in the northern part of this country, are occupying about 20% of the land, but that's where 80% of the people live. Remember that area in green. They occupy the capital of Sana'a. They're friends with Iran. The red areas, which the government, the so-called government, which is supported by Saudis, occupies, was mainly in this area, the southern portion. This whole area is huge, but there are very few people live in it. The yellow is the southern movement, which we'll talk about. That's supported by the UAE. and the small white area is occupied by Al-Qaeda at the present time. And the Chinese mediated a agreement between Iran and the Saudis, and 3 days later something impossible happened, is which the Houthis and the Saudis shook hands with a plan to stop the war that was going on. Let's study these various factions which are there. Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, are the is the revival of the Zaidi movement, which had once ruled the north. And they, even though they are called Shias all the time, as I think Ms. Juman will talk about it, there are many Sunnis who are part of this movement also. And they have the power base is in the northern portion where most of the people live. They have a good relationship with the Republic of Iran as such, but at the same time this is being misused by the media to show that this power struggle is going on between Saudis and Iran has a lot more influence than they claim it to be. President Ali Abdul Saleh had become the president in 1974 or so, and stayed in power, and then after the Arab impact as such, he shared power with the Houthis. Then he tried to take over all by himself. Then in 2017 he was shot by them. His nephew General Tariq has taken over his loyalists, and he's in the southern portion, and they are supported by UAE. Now President Mansour Hadi was a general of the south, and he was a vice president to President Salaleh. And he was elected for a 2-year term in 2012. So instead of that, he just kept on going, and he's been called the rightful leader of Yemen. The government, the so-called government, is who it is, because they are supported by MBS and the Saudis as such. The southern portion was always complaining that the north was not treating them well, and they wanted to have a separate state. And the president had fired General al-Zubaydi, and he went ahead and started a movement of his own, and he started a Southern Transitional Council, and that's related to UAE. Such. And then there's your friendly neighborhood, AKUP, which is the Al-Qaeda in Arab Peninsula. Anytime there's chaos, that they basically will take over. And so the question that arises is, how will the recent Saudi-Iran resumption of relationship affect the current situation in Yemen? And secondly, the Saudi-Houthi deal does not include all the factions that I just mentioned. Would the chaos continue with these groups and continuing to fight each other? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, and I'm glad to be with all of you. I want to first talk about 2 points.
Yeah, skip.
After
her answer, I'll do the Salwa, then we'll do
the Yemen war a civil war. It's absolutely not true, because it's led by the Saudi coalition, and many other countries are in the coalition. So it can't be a civil war when you have the lead of the country fighting with Saudi Arabia. The second one, they call this also a sectarian war, which is also not true, because people fighting on both sides of this conflict, the Yemeni, come from the same family. So we will have from one family some people fighting with Ansar Allah, and some people fighting with what is called the internationally recognized government that has been in Saudi Arabia since 2015, sitting in hotel rooms. So anytime somebody says this is a sectarian war, please correct that. And the third one that I also want to address, that this is a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which is also incorrect, because the Houthis or Ansar Allah, although they do have a good relationship with Iran, they're not Iran proxies. And they have for many times, I would say, disagreed with Iran, so publicly. in their media, and they told the Iranians that this is something that's our issue, and we don't want you to make an opinion about it. So they are definitely not listening to Iran. They do have a relationship with Iran. So in terms of the first question, I actually, although I have a strong dislike to the Saudi monarchy, I grew up since I was 12 years of age disliking the Saudis, the monarchy, because they have so many abuses. And one of the abuses is of my faith, because they are the reason we have Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So that's something. And then they start the war in Yemen, and my dislike for them is just multiplying many, many times. So with that knowledge, when I heard that the Saudis and the Iranians had an agreement, I was thrilled. I was very happy. I was very happy because we are a divided ummah. And I was very happy that these two countries that have, I wouldn't blame both countries equally, but these two countries have resulted in a lot of people taking sides. The disagreement is going to at least stop that division within our ummah, and I hope that it does. So, and yes, I'm happy for that, but in terms of how that can affect Yemen, very little. And the reason I say that is because Ansar Allah and their supporters. So Ansar Allah have with them people who are Nasris from the Nasri movement. They have people with them who are from Al-Mu'tamar, which is the political wing that was Ali Abdullah Saleh, the previous president. So they have a lot of people who are fighting with them. So although we're happy for that to happen, I don't think that will impact Yemen very much. It will impact Yemen in the sense that the Saudi are going to feel comfortable, because for the longest time they kept insisting that Iran has a huge role in Yemen. And if you read even CIA reports, if you read American embassy reports in Yemen, the US embassy had always said that Iran had no influence in Yemen. And they actually, when they were supporting Ayatollah Saleh with weapons to fight Al-Qaeda, they specifically told him not to use those weapons against Ansar Allah because they don't consider them terrorists. Because Ayatollah Saleh, for the long time, when he was fighting with Ansar Allah, in 6 words, he would claim that they are terrorists. So the Saudi hopefully will understand that Iran can be a friend and is not a threat in Yemen. And they know, the Saudis know more than anybody else, but they're using it as a PR stunt. Anytime you associate anybody with Iran, then that person is somehow becomes an evil person. And they use that very effectively, unfortunately, in the media. We were very happy again. I was thrilled when the Saudi ambassador went to Sana'a, because I want this war to end. It's been over 8 years. Yemen has been devastated economically. Yemen is under a blockade. So we were very excited about this. And however, there are things that have to happen first. And although they met in Ramadan, nothing has happened since then. The Houthis or Ansar Allah have asked for 3 things, which I agree with them 100%. And they need to pay the salaries from Yemen export of oil. So it's not from Saudi money. And the third one is that they need to stop bombing Yemen. And so these are reasonable requests. I hope that something happens with that. In terms of all the other groups that are in the middle of this, and you mentioned quite a few, but they are all aligned. Either there are 3 main groups in Yemen, Ansar Allah and the people who support them, and as I said, there are people from different groups supporting them. We also have the internationally recognized government, which is kind of a joke, because a government needs to be recognized by its people, not by the international community. And then we have the Southern Transitional Council that is supported by the Emiratis, so they can take all the Yemeni ports, especially in the south. and the Emiratis have already taken Socotra, which controls the Strait of Al-Manda, where most of the oil export from Saudi goes to. So these are the three groups that exist today. I personally believe that if we have the international meddlers out of the equation, that the Yemeni people can actually sit down and make peace. And just before the Saudis started their unjust war on Yemen, Jamal bin Ammar, who was the UN envoy to Yemen at that point in time, had announced that the Yemeni agreed to make a unity government. And all of the factions have agreed to that unity government. And they were discussing where they were going to be signing that agreement. And one of the places they were going to sign that agreement was in Riyadh. And while Jamal bin Ammar was still in Sana'a, the Saudis started bombing Yemen.
There is going to be a drone that is going to come through this area. So it is like a drone with a camera on it, and it's trying to record the whole thing. So try not to look at it. And during this time, Scott, if you want to comment for about a minute or so on Yemen, you can please free to do so.
Look,
is it coming through?
One of the foremost experts on Yemen, so I'm hesitant to say anything other than to reinforce what she has said. This is a conflict driven not only by Saudi Arabia, but by the United States. It's an American-supported conflict. As I said earlier, America needs conflict. We need conflict to continue the military-industrial complex dominated the economy. We need conflict to continue to keep the rules-based international order on the front stage. But the reality is, when I use these terms like conflict and policy, it's very copacetic. It's an intellectual or quasi-intellectual conversation that's happening. But I think, as you know more than anybody, conflict means dead people. Conflict means suffering children. Conflict means mothers watching their children die. And in Yemen, again, numbers. We tend to throw numbers out there. We become immune to the numbers. So we just pile them on. We say 100 here, 1,000 here, 10,000. Then we're talking hundreds of thousands, but it means nothing because it's just a number. These are human beings that are dying. And in America today, I don't have to say this to this audience because you know. I don't want to appear to be racist, but I'm going to say something that's very racist. White America has no sympathy for dying brown children in Yemen. They don't count. They don't register. They don't mean anything to us. And it's one of the great shames I feel as an American that we can't recognize the humanity of the suffering that's taking place in Yemen, because if we did, this war would have been over a long, long, long time ago.
Thank you very much.
May I ask you that?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the issues that have come up, thank you, Scott, that is actually very correct. So when the Saudi and the Houthi and Ansarullah started talking, the U.S. government sent several envoys, including Jack Sullivan, including Linda King, and including McGurk, all of these high-level people, to ask the Saudis not to honor the agreement they have with Ansarullah. So the U.S. did not want this conflict to end.
Yes. Reverend, is this a democracy or apartheid? The definition of apartheid is an institutionalized oppression by one racial group over the other. Let's see if that's the case. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Beth Salem, Harvard Law School all have given reports in the past couple of years which have shown that Palestinians are treated as inferior. Palestinians from river to the sea constitute about 50% of the population and 20% of the Israeli population itself. Ben Gurion, who's their founder, had said that this state should be 100% Hebrew settlement, Hebrew farm, Hebrew port. And he called African immigrants, these are Jews who came from Ethiopia and other places, as savages. Does that sound like the founder of a nation? Law of return. Say, for example, in Bel Air, Houston, or Brooklyn, New York. You live over there, and you have never stepped foot in this state, but yet you decide to go and live over there. And you will be allowed to live over there, and you will be given a free ticket. And once you get there, the citizenship law will allow you to become a citizen as such, and your spouse will get the same treatment. Absentee properties law is that if you leave the country for 8 years, if you're gone for 8 years, you will lose your property. There are many Palestinians who have lost their homes because of this. And it's not because they don't want to come back. Israel does not allow them to come back, and then they take their homes away from there. But this law does not apply to the Jews over there. Ethnic in engineering is in practice over there, in which they build all around the Palestinian community, choking off its expansion. And there's only 1% of the Palestinians Arabs who may get permission to build new homes over there. 2018 nation-state law is the best one of them all, because it clearly states, very clearly states, Israel is the state of the Jewish people. Benjamin Netanyahu had this famous tweet in which he quoted this, and he said very clearly, this is a nation only of Jewish people as such. The digital apartheid is something that we do not discuss, but there are software. Red Wolf is the software which is used at checkpoints. It uses biometrics, fingerprints, retinal scans. Blue Wolf is facial recognition. White Wolf is used by the sedentalists. The whole thing is called, the three of them are put together called the Wolf Pack. And in that, just imagine you get pulled over by a cop. As a driver, you produce your driver's license. Over here, these people would not only have to show their ID, but they take pictures of not only the driver, but all the occupants of the car. This is how a database has been created. Drones and cameras all over the place, and with the goal of having eyes everywhere. This technology, unfortunately, is coming from the West, like people from the One is Israel Front, etc. My question to you, Reverend, is what is the opinion of the Christians who live in that state? And is Israel a democracy or an apartheid to them? Can you please give us yours and your family's personal experiences and such?
I want to say it's a great honor and a privilege to be with you tonight. I'm grateful for the invitation. And I'm grateful for the connection with Aisha, who said, I know Fahid, and that's the reason I was invited. So I want to say a special thanks to you. I want to salute the organizers, because I already heard lectures, and I went to workshop, and I tell you, I will come again and become a student and learn. And I love the way you bring children, youth, and young adults, and also older adults, all together to fellowship and deal with your faith and how we become good citizens in the United States and effective in the area of advocacy. I give you a map. It's on your table, so maybe one person can spread it.
इसके बाद मौलाना एलिया के पास प्लैक्स हैं, मैं उनको तीनों को देने प्रोग्राम फिनिश होगा ना, तो उनको इनवाइट कर लीजिए एलिया को प्लैक्स.
If Americans give, I really would like for you to take this website seriously, because if you want to deal with Israel and Palestine, this website can give you more resources and facts. The woman is a journalist and did her homework, and she's the one that produced this information. First of all, I would like to mention something about U.S. journalism.
Thank you.
I was invited by Mrs. King.
Thank you.
I was invited by Mrs. King in January 2002 to do the invocation. at Ebenezer Baptist Church. That's the home church of Martin Luther King. So our First Lady Bush was here, Mrs. King was here, and I'm supposed to do the invitation. The invitation means I start in the beginning. So the program says, Reverend Fahid Abu Akim, Presbyterian minister. And I began my prayer saying, God Almighty, God of nonviolence, I come to you in prayer in the name of Jesus, the Holy One that Martin Luther King served. And while I'm praying, that journalist sitting in the balcony in that small church at the Ebenezer Baptist Church introduced me to the nation.
We got it. Thank you. I'll keep them here.
As a Muslim
Thank you.
clergyman. Listen to that. That journalist not supposed to do Reverend, Presbyterian, and praying in the name of Jesus. What was more powerful? Abu Akim. Abu Akim is Arabic. Arabic is a Muslim. God bless America. He introduced me as a Muslim imam. So I'm not against the Muslim imam, but one elder at First Presbyterian Church called the station and said, "This is my minister. And my wife, sister, is a teacher in Temple, Florida." She was driving and said that, Fahid is an imam. So Samira called Mary and said that Fahid switched religion. So I'm saying this to say, in a very simplistic way, let's face it, anytime they think good old Americans have done to think about the Middle East, Arabs is a Muslim, Israel is a Jew, and Christianity maybe was born in Pennsylvania or in Texas. In Pennsylvania was Bethlehem, and in Texas you have Nazareth, where Jesus lived for 30 years. I'm saying this to say, anytime, share your story where you come from, because our Americans do not study global issues. Now, your moderator really gave every information about the three of us, and he is out of the box. Okay? So I grew up in a small village called Kufr Yassir, 25 miles north of Nazareth, and the majority were Palestinian Christians, and then Muslims, and then some Druze. So this year, Palestinians are remembering something called the Nakba. The word Nakba means catastrophe. You lost a home, you lost a land, you lost a masjid, a church, a business, everything. So anytime we need to deal with the Israel-Palestine situation, we need, after 55 years in the United States, we need to understand the Israeli-Jewish narrative and Palestinian narrative. And after 55 years, I discovered that the Israeli-Jewish narrative is well done in the synagogue, in the church, in the newspaper, in the television. I'm discovering that the Palestinian narrative is a dead narrative. So I grew up in that village, and the only thing that I remember about the Nakba was going with my mother, 5 sisters, and 2 brothers. As a 4-year-old kid in 1948, the one you are close to will be your mother. So I can see myself like on a television screen running around my dad, 5 sisters, and 2 brothers looking for my mother. She was not there. And suddenly I looked, and she was on the top of the roof. To say to Americans on the top of the roof, it doesn't make sense. But in Palestine, roofs are flat. So she was waving her hand, and I can see her like in a television screen. We went up, not to the north, toward Lebanon, we went up to the mountain to a Druze village. And we were put in a makeshift, like a scout's tent. And we were there several months. And we came back, and my mother was still in the home. And 5 Palestinian villages were destroyed next to my village. So as a teenager, I always wanted to know, why she did not go with us. And my mother said to that, you take the children, you can protect them. This is our home, our land, our church. If they want to kill me, we need to kill them at home. So I discovered that my mother was the treasurer. She was the mover and shaker. My dad was a farmer. The only thing he wanted to do is love us and educate us. But mother is the really that nurture us spiritually and also to grow. So as I think about 1948, the Nakba, immediately think in your mind that 500, this is an Israeli Jewish professor, and I'd like for some of you to take his name. His name is Ilan Pappy. He wrote the book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. What happened in 1948? And the only sources he used is Israeli sources and British sources, not Syrian and not Arab. So you cannot do it. He's a scholar and excellent, and he explained how Israel destroyed 500 villages and exiled by force almost 1 million people to Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank, Jordan, to Gaza, and also in Egypt. So, as we remember the Nakba, we need to share our story of what happened, because what I told you right now, I don't think they teach it in where you come from, or I discovered they don't teach it even in Egypt. So we need to tell our story. And then, as I think about the Christians, basically 1948 hit hard to the Christians. They were almost close to 24% of the Palestinian population. And because of the new state of Israel, the majority were expelled, became refugees in Lebanon and other countries, and then Europe and also the United States. So, as I think about the Christian population, really it's a shocking deal that American churches don't take that seriously. You were almost 24% of the population, and today, the year 2023, we are less than 2%. If that is not the red line, I don't know which to what. So the thing that I wanted to say also, that sometimes in the West, you want to say it's a religious fight between Muslims and between Jews. And I want to tell you, religion is used to oppress people. In this case, both the Israeli, the Zionists, and also, basically the Christian Zionists, especially you are loaded with them here in the state of Texas. When it comes down to that situation, they use the Bible to oppress people. Really, the Bible, Hebrew Scripture, New Testament, and the Quran, the theme of teaching is justice, respecting human beings, caring for others. But to use God to uproot people in His name, I don't think it's biblical. So as I think about the Palestinian Christians, I think about they suffer equal and more than the Palestinian Muslims. When you are oppressed, you struggle together. So Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims work together against the occupation. The thing that I wanted to say very clearly, the Palestinians going to suffer more. You see, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are settler colonial states. There's a difference between a colonial and a settler colonial. A colonial, like England goes to India, suck the resources and leaves. A settler colonial have one goal: to uproot the natives take the land and take the resources. We did that in the United States. We don't have any more resistance from the Native Americans, and every agreement between the U.S. government and the Native American was broken. Okay? The same thing in Canada, the same thing in Australia and in New Zealand. Israel is a settler colonial state. And that means in 1948, when they came, destroyed 530 villages, and exiled 1 million people out as refugees, they almost finished the job. But look what happened. My parents were only 155% that stayed on the land. 155,000 Palestinian, Muslim and Christian stayed and became citizens of the state of Israel. Answer the question, I think the apartheid system started from day one, because the new state of Israel created 80 laws against the Palestinians. And imagine, from the time of 48 to 1966, when I came to the United States to study, I couldn't leave my village. Listen to that. I couldn't leave my village without going to the Israeli military governor and get a permit. If I don't have a permit, I go to court. And if I don't have money to pay for the fee, I go to jail. Okay? So answering your question, the apartheid system started from day one. Okay? So that's 1948 to 66. 1967, Israel beat Egypt, Jordan, and Syria and takes Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and then, of course, the Golan Heights. And basically, the Israeli clutches each little bit about the Palestinians who are citizens of the state, and all of their clutches went on the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. Imagine, today if you are a Palestinian Christian, a Palestinian Muslim in Bethlehem, 7 miles south of Jerusalem, you cannot go there without a permit. You cannot go to the hospital without a permit. You cannot go to your field without a permit, and you cannot go to the university without a permit. What I'm trying to say, everything I'm telling you, the American media does not have the gut to tell the truth about what Israel is doing with our tax money, because really Israel receives close to $4 billion as a gift. So Israel cannot control the Palestinians, half of the population, because we started 155,000, now we are 2 million. Gaza, 2.2 million, and the West Bank, 2.8. So it's 7 million, as he said, 50% Israeli Jews, 50% Palestinians. And I'm saying that the Palestinians going to suffer more because the apartheid system will start losing power, start become irrational. Like in South Africa. They did more in the last years before Mandela than any other. The same thing. Why this last Ramadan, the Israeli government tells the soldiers to go to Al-Aqsa Masjid in Ramadan. You know, if you want a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim to go crazy, push that religious stuff. And that's what they did. So to me, we need to say to the Palestinians, we have solidarity with you, but the journey is long. Why? Because the state of Israel is supported by the United States, the superpower. And unless we, as American citizens, start doing advocacy for justice where we come from, and also for the cause of Palestine, because as my sister Aisha said, really the Palestinian issue is not a Palestinian issue, it's a Palestinian It's an Arab, it's a Muslim, but it's a global issue, and we need your support.
Thank you very much, Reverend. There's the second round of questions. I'll keep it a little faster because so that we can have the audience also ask the questions. We have been hearing about Putin being this warmonger, taking over this place, wants to expand and all that, but is there another side to the story? For that discussion, I think you need to study this map, and you'll see the red portion, Russia, being surrounded by NATO. All these blue is NATO. Finland has become NATO. Sweden is almost that. Belarus is pro-Russian as such, and here is Ukraine, Crimea that Russia took over, and here is Georgia. These two states will play a role in our discussion as such. So 2008, NATO summit takes place in Bucharest, in which it is announced that Ukraine and Georgia will become members. Russia becomes outraged, vehemently opposes this. It calls it a major threat and a red line. We have recently found out that both Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy opposed this, and Arthur Burns, the ambassador, had wrote a letter to Condoleezza Rice stating that this is going to be considered a declaration of war, and 100% Russia will respond. So within a few months, Russia did have a war with Georgia, and instead of NATO realizing that this was a problem, they doubled down and made Ukraine a de facto member as such. NATO during this time did not keep quiet, as the West tells you. NATO was training about 10,000 troops a year. Defensive weapons had been sent over there. So in 2017, Operation Sea Breeze and Rapid Trident were launched. These are military operation and naval operation aimed towards Russia. And such. Zelensky, who became elected on a platform of being friends with Russia, turns over, shuts down the Russian media, arrests Putin's close friends, visits US to a hero's welcome over here. November 2021, you have a chance to now reverse course. Instead, the charter reaffirmed 2008 Bucharest summit. Russia sent a letter over here with 3 demands specifically about Ukraine not becoming a member. And Blinken laughs at that. February 24th, 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Now, I would never say that any offensive war is justified as such, but put America in Russia's place and see what would have happened if Mexico had turned communist as such. Well, I think there was a state called Cuba, which had something like that had happened, and how did we respond to that? So neither side can win this war, but they cannot afford to lose either. U.S. has put in $75 billion and Russia about $80 billion or so. My question is, if it looks like Ukraine is going down, will U.S. directly intervene with its own troops? And if Russia is totally cornered, will it resort to nuclear weapons?
Well, thank you for a very easy question. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. First of all, I think we have to just touch to understand the answer, you have to understand the problem. I've always said that if you fail to define the problem properly, any solution you come up to the problem is solving nothing, because there's nothing to solve. The United States has been targeting Russia since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia has been in the crosshairs. It's been the central part of American policy to keep Russia down. But not just to keep Russia down, but to break Russia apart. Americans, we can't afford to have this large nation of Russia with its tremendous natural resources working in singular fashion, because if Russia succeeds, it replicates the place of the Soviet Union in the world, and we just fought and won a Cold War against the Soviet Union. We didn't want that to happen again. So this brought about the decade of the 1990s, and it's central to understand this. I just came back from Russia, and I will tell you right now, that the 1990s are remembered as one of the darkest periods in modern Russian history. It is the darkest period in modern Russian history. The United States went in and we economically exploited Russia, stole trillions of dollars worth of their wealth. We politically dominated them, keeping in a very weak president. You know, people talk about the Russians controlling the 2016 election. I don't want to get too political here. They didn't. But in 1996, we bought an election in Russia, and we bragged about it. It's on the front page of Time magazine, how the United States went in and bought the election. Boris Yeltsin was not going to win. We won the election for him. Why? We wanted him to be there because he did whatever we wanted him to do. That was the perfect Russian leader. In December of 1999, Boris Yeltsin stepped aside, and the most unexpected thing happened. Vladimir Putin, an unknown, became the president of Russia. We thought we could turn Putin into Yeltsin. We couldn't. Putin was something different. I'm not saying that Putin's great. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm saying he's different. And the biggest difference of Putin over Yeltsin is that Putin believes in Russia. Putin believes that Russia should stand on its own 2 feet, that Russia should aspire to the nation it has the potential to be, not a global dominating power, but a nation that lives up to its true potential as a world power, not the world power, a world power. They believe in multipolarity. This is the exact opposite direction the United States wanted Russia to go, and since 2000, we have been engaged in a policy designed to destroy Russia. You have to understand that because this didn't begin in 2008. This began in 1992. 2008, before we invited NATO, or Ukraine to NATO, in February of 2008, February, March, April, William Burns, former U.S. ambassador, wrote a memorandum called Net means net. No means no. Don't invite Ukraine into NATO, he said, because if you do, you will inevitably create the conditions for a Russian military intervention in Ukraine. This is the leading U.S. expert, the ambassador to Russia, telling the U.S. government that if you invite Ukraine to join NATO, Russia will invade. We invited them to join NATO in November. What does that tell you about the intent? In 2008, we wanted Russia to invade. And it took us from 2008 to 2024 to get Russia to do that. Why? Because Russia didn't want to invade. That's the most important lesson here. Russia did not want to go to war against Ukraine. This war was forced on Russia. The 2014 Maidan Revolution, they call it. It was a coup d'etat orchestrated by the CIA using links with the Banderist movement. That's an extreme neo-Nazi ideology that was pro-Ukrainian nationalists, pro-Nazis in the 1930s and 40s. The CIA directed them for almost a decade to carry out a covert war in Ukraine, and then for the rest of the Cold War, we paid them. There's a diaspora in the United States, 60 miles away from my home. My home in New York, there's a park called Heroes Park. In that park, they have statues. One of the statues is of Stefan Bandera, a mass murderer, a man who killed 30 to 40,000, or his forces killed 34,000 Jewish people during the Second World War on behalf of Nazi Germany, a man who killed over 110,000 Polish citizens, 220,000 Russians. He's a mass murderer, and he's called a hero 60 miles from my home because in the United States, we gave safe haven to the Banderist movement in diaspora. They do the same thing in Canada, they do the same thing in Australia, they do the same thing in Germany. We use them to disenfranchise, to tear down Ukraine, and then we put them in power in 2014. They started a war. They call it the Ukrainians, this Banderist movement, went to war against the Russian people of Ukraine. They called it an anti-terrorist operation. This war generated a tremendous amount of violence. What was Russia's response? To accept a peace initiative called the Minsk Accords. And from 2015 until 2022, Russia's #1 policy objective in Ukraine was to implement the Minsk Peace Accords. That would have left Ukraine territorially intact and politically independent. But we know that the Merkel and Hollande, the German and French leaders, together with the Ukrainians, viewed this as a sham. It was a joke. It was to buy time until NATO could build up a Ukrainian military capable of militarily solving the problem of the Donbass of Crimea. They wanted war. And we know this because they knew what they were doing when they invited Ukraine in. What was Russia's response? To pursue peace at every turn of the road. Even after, in October of 2021, it became clear that the Minsk Accords were not going to be implemented. What was Russia's response? To put 2 draft treaties on the table. December 17, 2021. One draft treaty to NATO, one draft treaty to the United States, saying, let's work together for a new European security framework that will leave Ukraine politically intact. They were not looking for the dismemberment of Ukraine. And yet we, the West, are turning our backs on it. Why? Because we wanted war. So Russia gave them what they wanted, but they didn't. It wasn't called war, it's called a special military operation. Why? Because Russia wasn't seeking the destruction of Ukraine. They were seeking to get Ukraine to the negotiating table. Less than 1 week after Russian troops went into Ukraine, they started these negotiations, broken up Belarus. 3 negotiations leading to a 4th scheduled for April 1st, 2022 in Istanbul. They had a peace treaty ready to be signed. Russia was ready to sign this deal. It was NATO, the United States, that told Ukraine, don't do it. And now Russia's left with the consequences. Russia can win this war. That's another place where I disagree. Ukraine cannot win this war. This is an absolute statement of truth. I'm a military guy. I know what it takes to win a war. Ukraine doesn't have it. It's a nation of great people of great courage. But the other thing you have to understand, I'll just give you a little side story here. They just finished this battle in Bakhmut. We call it the meat grinder. The number of casualties is mind-bending. The Wagner group, which has been demonized in the West as this mercenary group of murderers, most professional soldiers you'll ever meet, they surrounded a group of Ukrainians. They shouted out, brothers, surrender. Surrender, we will treat you well. You know what the response to these Ukrainian soldiers were? Ukrainian soldiers? Russians don't surrender. If you know anything about Russian history, you'll know that that's a slogan that came from the early on in the Second World War when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. They surrounded a Russian soldier and they said, surrender. He said, Russians don't surrender. They killed him. Ukrainian soldiers view themselves as Russians because they are Russians. This is very much a tragic war between two sides that should not be fighting against one another, but this war has been pushed on them by the United States, the collective West. Russia will win this war because Russia can't lose this war, because this is a war about the existential survival of Russia. If Russia loses this conflict, that means Russia no longer exists. As Russian politicians have said over and over again, and people should listen to what these guys say, a world where there is no Russia is a world that cannot exist. Please listen to what they're saying. That if it is the goal of the United States and the collective West to destroy Russia, then the world will not exist. And that's a nuclear conflict. Some people say, and you said it yourself, that you don't promote offensive wars, you don't promote death and destruction. Neither do I. I got in trouble for this, and I'll say it here because you guys brought me here because I get in trouble, apparently. But, you know,
very well said.
I've been to war, and I know what war is, and I would never want to fight a war again. And I believe that everything possible short of war should be done before one talks about going to war. I like dogs. I own 3 of them. Love them to death. If I see a stray dog, I pet it. I feed it. I'll take it to the vet to get it looked at, because I'm just that kind of person. But there are rabid dogs out there. You don't pet rabid dogs. There's a book, To Kill a Mockingbird, that turned into a movie. Atticus Finch, the lawyer in the movie. There's a scene where there's a rabid dog in the streets. They tell the kids to get off the streets, and Atticus Finch comes out. He's a man of peace. And he takes the rifle and he shoots the rabid dog. Why? Because rabid dogs have to be shot. It doesn't mean you love violence, but it means you have to take care of the disease that's in your community. And when you have a situation in Ukraine where the United States and the collective West has turned Ukraine into a disease designed to kill Russia, then Russia has every right to use whatever means necessary to prevent that disease from infecting it. This is a just war. History is on the side of Russia, and the world should hope that Russia wins this war, not because you're anti-American, not because you're anti-anything, because you're pro-peace. If Russia loses this war, none of us will be alive. And that's the truth.
Thank you, Scott. Ms. Juman, Yemen. When we talk about Yemen, we see these type of images of death, destruction, and malnutrition, poor kids in horrible state, and that's it. It is real. So we should be seeing those things. However, there is hope, and because there is hope over there, I see there is a future for Yemen. That future for Yemen means tapping into untapped resources. So instead of showing these big pictures as such, I want to show you some positive sides of Yemen as such. The beauty of Yemen is in its architecture. This is Sana'a. Look at the beautiful architecture that is there in these parts of the country as such. And it can turn to future tourism. And these are castles in the sky. And this is stunning type of buildings that were built high up in the sky. And this Kotra Island, which you mentioned earlier, I suppose we lost saying that is an island which has some unique flora and fauna not found anywhere in the world as such. And this island, unfortunately, has been taken over by UAE in a lot of different ways, because they've been courting the local residents for a long time. And Yemen, there are more UAE flags on this island than there are Yemeni flags. And Yemen may have lost this island before the war ends itself. There is not much oil and natural gas in Yemen, not as much as Saudis and other places over there, but there is some. Okay, and coca was part of that thing. But there is Bab el-Mandeb. You mentioned that to some extent. I just want to go over this in more detail. This is a 28-kilometer stretch of water through which it connects the Indian Ocean over here through the Red Sea, Suez Canal into the Mediterranean, which means that all the oil from Saudis and all that, Saudis don't have oil facilities here, they have it on the eastern sides, right? All this oil goes through this strait as such. There is 62 million barrels of oil, which is 9% of the world's oil supply, goes through this place. And if this strait wasn't there, you would end up going through the Horn of Africa to get there, which is taking months and billions of dollars more. There's one country which understood the importance of the strait, and that's the country of Djibouti. This tiny little state, what it did was it put this precious real estate out for sale, and it has a bunch of major superpowers and their aunts and uncles who have built bases over there. And there are a lot of bases. Some countries have 2 bases over there. And that could be something in the future for Yemen. It could use this strait in a peaceful way, or and end up building bases over there too. So the question that I have for you is, from the practical side, what do you expect the future of Yemen with the current realities to be? Hypothetically, if things were perfect and you had control, how would you improve the plight of the Yemeni people? I think Queen Sheba is claimed by both Yemen as well as Ethiopia. So for the next 5 minutes, if you were Queen Sheba, what would you do?
I do want to say that Queen Sheba is mentioned in the Quran as a wise woman when King Solomon asked her to come to faith, to believe in God. Her counsel said, we are a very strong people. We can fight him and we can win. And she said, no. Kings, when they enter a country, they destroy it. And they make their people slave. I would go and test him. And she did, and she believed in God and brought Yemen to believe in God. So I do hope that Yemen finds its next Queen Sheba in the new generation. But that brings me to a few points. One is Yemen has a rich history. Yemen is, in my mind, one of the most beautiful countries you'll ever visit. The people are very kind and very generous. We have over 4 million internally displaced people because of the bombing on Yemen. These people, the majority of them, are not in camps like you see on TV with a lot of the people who have to forced to leave their homes. These people are hosted by other Yemeni families. I remember when there was fighting in my area where I come from, somebody from Hadramaut, a colleague, called me and told me that my family in Yemen can go and stay with them if they needed to. This is the generosity of the people of Yemen. I travel to Yemen a lot because I manage a lot of health projects in Yemen. I've been to people's homes where they have very little to eat, yet they will spend a month's salary to try and feed me. At one point in time, I was traveling for 2 months between one village to another. I fasted the whole 2 months. So I can tell people, I'm sorry, I cannot accept your hospitality. Because I knew they would spend all what they have on me. That's the kind of people that are the Yemen people. So they are very resourceful, they're very strong, they're fiercely independent. Yemen has never been conquered throughout its history. Yemen is considered the graveyard of the Turks, if people know that. Ataturk's grandfather was actually killed in Yemen. And so it's a country, even in Aden, when the British took Aden, they only took Aden. They didn't take the whole area of Yemen. And even then, they were having so much trouble. They brought in 80% of the population from outside Yemen to dilute the Yemeni population because they were always fighting with them. So in a country that is fiercely independent, that people are so resourceful, and the blockade in Yemen has shown us that. So I take taxis when I go to Yemen, and I go every year, and inshallah I'm going next month. You will be in a taxi, and there's no fuel, there's no gas. So half of the trip, they would be riding the car on fuel, and then they don't have any more fuel, but he will stop and switch it into gas. This is something that they developed themselves within Yemen. When the Saudis destroy the electricity, for example, all the power grids, Yemen resorted to using solar panels. However, the Saudis started preventing solar panels from coming into Yemen. So they only built their own solar panels. So every time we throw something at them, they find a way around it. The pictures that you have seen, they built these places many years ago. We have bridges that connect mountains, and how they build those bridges between mountains is beyond me. These are people who carved the mountains to make them homes. And not just carved mountains, they made them very beautiful to the eyes. They consider the environment and everything that they build. So I see Yemen will have a very bright future because what we have the people of Yemen who can rebuild their country. What I would like is for the US, the UK, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and even Iranian influence to be out of Yemen. Because Yemen is one place sit down. I mean, this is a country with thousands of years of culture. We have tribal mediation that resolves so many conflicts. And I trust that they can do that. Since this war started on Yemen, There have been many, many issues that have been resolved locally. Every time the local population comes to resolve an issue, even between the warring factions, now, they resolve it before the Saudis know about it and spoil it for them. In terms of Socotra, the UAE may have their flags. It's a Yemeni island. And the Yemeni will never allow any country to rule their land. So they can enjoy it now, but there is so much right now going on in Socotra and otherwise. And the Yemeni are saying this: no foreign power will be able to stay among us. It's just not going to happen. Tourism will be one thing, but I also know Yemenis are very, they not just think out of the box, but they're also very creative. I know in many instances, they have won many awards, whether it's in education, whether it's in science, whether it's in medicine. So a lot of the Yemeni diaspora, when they get the opportunity, they excel. And even within Yemen, they excel as well. So I have a lot of trust. And I know it as a fact that they will do well, and Yemen, inshallah, will have its peace and will rebuild again. But this time, we will rebuild as an independent state without the meddling of any other nation in our affairs.
Thank you very much. My last question. Jesus lived and died in Judea. He's in the Church of Holy Sepulchre. And Jerusalem's Christians used to be about 25%, and they are now down to 1%. After the wars of 48 and 67, the Christians faced land confiscation very similar to those in the Muslims did. The 2013 Government Christian Forum, due to pressure from the West, was created to address their concerns, and things got better. Until the ultra-right-wing movement has come into place, into power as such, churches and cemeteries have been defaced. The age-old practice, this is a practice that used to happen over there, age-old practice of spitting on the clergy has been resumed as such. The Lateran Trappist monastery was set on fire, and the graffiti over there said Jesus was a monkey. The Church of Flagellation had a Jesus statue, a beautiful Jesus statue. It was knocked down with a hammer. The Church of Multiplication, there was arson over there. The ultra-right-wing politician Ben Gvir, who defended these attackers, is now the Minister of National Security. The Christian Zionists are a huge source of support for them, both financially as well as politically. John Hagee's Kufi, which is right here in San Antonio, is a massive supplier of money for them. This all started with William Blackstone's book, Jesus is Coming, in which he talks about the Armageddon, and that has been used by the ultra-right-wing Christians to promote this whole thing. So my question to you is, what is the correct biblical version of this phenomenon of Armageddon as such, and how do you convince the American Christians that they are not doing God's work by funding Zionism?
I want to confess that your moderator did his homework. Give him a big hand. Christian Zionism basically started from something called dispensational theology. Dispensational theology means period. The first period is Brother Adam and Eve, then Brother Abraham, Moses, and then before, and then the prophets, and then Jesus, and then the early church, and so forth. These are the periods, and they say the last period, dispensation, the last period, is the creation of the state of Israel as a fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, so on that basis, the Christian Zionists build, a lot of theology that the main, denomination like the Catholic, the Mother Church, the Orthodox Church, the Catholic, and the Presbyterian, the Methodist, the Episcopal, and so forth, do not teach that theology. So in the case of the Presbyterians, way back in 1946, they said that dispensational theology is not biblical and it's a heresy. And the same thing about 94, 95, they did the same thing. The issue is that Christian Zionism really want to take God Almighty and force God to do something. Okay, so in their theology, it's so bloody to a point that Pat Robertson on television said, for Israel to make a mistake and leave Gaza alone, this was against the will of God. So in Christian Zionist theology, the presence of a Palestinian Christian and a Palestinian Muslim is against the will of God. They need to go to Mississippi or to Texas. I mean, imagine the church that my mother took me to worship in, an Orthodox church, is 800 years old. And that's the third building. So the first building was 800 years after Jesus, and then another building, and the third building that we went to worship in is 800 years old, 4 times the age of the American Constitution. You want to say that Palestinian Christian, hey, go to Texas? On what basis? Okay, so the other thing that we need to mention there is that Christian Zionism in the end, I mean in that kind of a theology, say that when the Jews come all the way to Palestine, anyone that does not accept Jesus is going to be killed. So the place called Armageddon, that's in their theology. It's taught in Baptist, Pentecostal, growing churches. It's a big deal in America. And the same thing with Haggai. Haggai gives more money to Israel to build settlement because that's the will of God more than he gives to mission. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But it's real to them. So we need to understand that. So I think that's the reason Netanyahu always cater to the Christian Zionists and in the United States and so forth. So answering your question, Christian Zionism is a heresy, but the problem is this. The people, the mainline churches, don't have money to do broadcasting like John Hagee. John Hagee have millions, and he influenced more people than the mainline one. And books that influence a lot of that theology called the Left Behind series. Okay, and there's other authors that that kind of a theology, from my perspective, is not biblical. To me, the God of the universe who came to us as people of faith, I think God wants us to love and respect one another. So as I think about Jerusalem, it's holy for Jews, holy for Christians, and holy for Muslims. So historically, Jerusalem, they fought to capture it and so forth. I think in the 21st century, we need to have a vision. How can Israeli Jews and Palestinians live under a constitution that make them equals? We have 7 million, 7 million. They are there to stay. So to me, as I think about Christian history, I want to say clearly that the Palestinians' Nakba and suffering is paying for the sin of the Christians of Europe. It is the Christians of Europe in Portugal, in France, in Spain, in Russia, in England, and finally in Germany that killed the Jews, not the Palestinians. And I think you need to say clearly to everyone in the United States, it is the Muslims that welcome the Jews to their midst. And every Arab capital have a quarter called Jewish quarter, that they flourish and live in peace. But Zionism is different than Judaism. And there is a book I'd like for you to read, that there's a difference between Israel as a state and Zionism as a political ideology, which is a settler colonial, and that is to uproot the Palestinians out. Okay? And then, of course, Judaism exists in 100 nations. And so we need to do a lot of homework. Like right now, imagine there are two key laws in a lot of states in the United States. One law that says if you take a contract in the state of Texas, you must sign an agreement that you will not boycott Israel. A good number of you don't know it, but it's in the book. The same thing in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? In Georgia, the Christian Zionists with our Zionist local, they went to the state house, they passed it, they went to the Senate, passed it, and when it went to General Assembly, it went as a bill that is anonymous. Nobody discussed it. Huh? So American system is beautiful, but you can bluff the hell out of it. Huh? So this recent thing that I want to mention about activism is last month I discovered the power of advocacy. Another new bill came on that they want to say that Israel, Zionism, and Judaism is one. And anytime you criticize Israel, you are anti-Semitic. So they wanted Judaism and to cover for all of that. So this bill came to the House, passed. And they called me, Elise Cohen from Jewish Voice for Peace and others, and they said it's going to the Senate. You know, a bill needs to go to one house, go to another Senate to pass, then it goes to the governor. So we went, I saw 15 Jewish young men and women. I saw 50 young Muslim brothers and sisters, and some of us old-timers Christians, and we witnessed to the Judicial Committee of the State Senate. And there were 9. So 5 voted to table it. That means they're not going to touch it now. 4 said, no, we need to deal with it. And I think our witness has a lot to do with it. So in my mind, look what happened. I start to calculate. For the last 75 years, our sisters and brothers will go in and advocate their ideas, and it passes. But there's no anyone to speak the other side of the story. I discovered the power of advocacy. So I hope you, sisters and brothers, you need to be involved in the school, in the city, in the county, in the state, in the federal. If we're going to be good Muslims in this nation, we need to know the power of advocacy. I saw the power of advocacy in action when Jewish, Christian, and Muslim came together and we stopped that bill. Of course, we need to do some training between now and January because they're going to come back. You remember about the bill I told you about if you take a contract, the first one that happened 6-7 years ago in the state of Georgia, it says, anytime you take a contract for $1,000, you need to sign that you will not boycott Israel. So this woman from California came to speak in the university, and the contract was for $1,000, and they want her to sign. She said, there's no way. I've been there and I saw. And when that happened, they canceled. When they canceled, she went to CARE, she went to ACLU and others, and they took the case to court. And the beautiful thing, the judge was Mr. Cohen. And Cohen said, that bill is against the U.S. Constitution. So the Zionists came back, said, forget about 1,000, let's jump it to 100,000. And this Jewish friend of mine, who is a lawyer for the Constitution, he said, I don't care if it's 1,000 or 100. In the end, it's going to hit me as an American Jew. It's unconstitutional. So I like for us to become good Muslims. That means we need to be active in our community.
Do we have some time for questions in the audience? Okay. If we could get any audience questions. Do you have a mic over there? Can somebody,
Yeah,
just take a,
Scott,
can I let you share?
Brother Francis said, we also had the same thing, the IHR definition of anti-Semitism came to the city of Seattle Council. And once we learned about it, again, a group of Muslim, Jewish, and Christians went to the city council, presented our case, and luckily for us, it was voted down. So they're not going to bring it again.
If I can get a question, please. Go ahead. No, please, go ahead.
My question is for Dr. Jaman. Thank you so much for your insight and for all the panelists inside. Alhamdulillah, actually, just like Dr. Ali, I had an opportunity to get to know Dr. Jaman through her amazing work with YRRF. As you guys may have passed our table, just doing a bit of marketing for Karima Care is a nonprofit organization. We are collaborating, we've been collaborating for over a year with YRF in terms of trying to provide humanitarian aid to Yemen, particularly the northern part of Yemen in Sana'a. One of the questions that I often receive is that considering the embargo that has been in effect, and of course knowing that the challenges in terms of getting the aid to the northern part of Yemen, how do you navigate through these challenges to be able to provide that aid? And even though, as Dr. Ali mentioned,
you share one mic, I'll pass it to the audience.
And I need some more water.
What is, how has that made
Audience में
this
कोई
process
है कोई
better in
volunteer
terms of
audience में
providing
mic
that
देने के
aid?
वास्ते? अच्छा, thank you.
If you can just provide your comments and inform us.
Thank you for your question. We were able to establish an organization here in the US and also registered in Yemen. We had to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to send money to Yemen. And we partnered with Karima Care the last year, and we were able to do a lot of work. Please visit our website, yemenfoundation.org. And if you want to support some of that work, Karima Care is an excellent partner with us. We can do that. Whether here in the US or in Yemen, are all volunteers. 100% of the donations go to support Yemen. We've decided to be apolitical as an organization, and that helps us in supporting a lot of people. We work with locals. We normally work in areas that are not reached by organizations, international organizations. We work in very difficult to reach areas, and you saw the mountains in Yemen. Some of these areas, a lot of organizations cannot reach them. We also work in frontline, so where there is active fighting. But because we are trusted by the local community, we are able to work in those places. We contact people who are local. We work directly with them. And that also helps us in terms of spending money in that communities, so we don't spend it in the capital, for example. But also, these people know the situation better, and we save on the cost of transportation. But I think the number one issue for us is trust. And we value that trust, and we want to continue to guard that, because that's the most important part. And with the US, as I said, we have to jump through many hoops to establish the organization and be able to send money to Yemen. We cannot send dollars to Yemen, by the way, because the US government has a lot of rules about that, and we don't have an intermediary bank that would transfer dollars to Yemen. We have to buy euros and then transfer euros, because there is a bank in Germany who's willing to be an intermediary bank for Yemen.
I just want to put in a plug for Karima Care also. The one thing is that You all know Sister Nasreen and Sister Jermaine. The unique thing about Karima Care, what they have done is to team up with the local people who are already doing the work. So they're not trying to recreate the things. They are teaming up with the right people around the world. They are doing the research and making our life a lot easier. Thank you very much for that. Go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for all your three panels that really shed some light on the political views. There is some good questions for you guys. I thank each and every one of you. I know it's hard.
Just keep the mic in front of
I
you.
work for the military. I don't know my lady there, and I don't know my priest over there. And God bless you all, and I thank you. But I have one question for two of you. I have a question for the lady from the Yemen and for my priest. First of all, we're going to be talking about Yemen. I believe Yemen should be free, and I believe that all of the people in the world should support, especially the Muslims, the Yemenis, and the Ansarullah, not all of the others. And the reason I say that, because Ansarullah is just more for people than all other factions. And you articulated it well through the speech you did. But my question is, I say, and I want all the participants to go out of Yemen, including Iran. But if you put Iran in the same opposite to the others, I differ from that view. Because Iran always said this was true during the war with Iraq, during the conflict with Afghanistan, the conflict with every neighbors, and right now Azerbaijan. These are our people. Iran does not want war with anybody. Iran wants peace. Iran is the representative of the Islamic world, if anybody believes or not. Regardless, this is the fact, because Iran is not to invade. In the last 300 years, we did not invade any country, and truly today, in the last 4 years. So Iran has always announced that if we are helping Ansarullah, it's because of part of the Muqawamat. Muqawamat means resistance against the atrocities of the world of atrocities. Not so. Please do not put Iran in the same state. Iran get out of Yemen is equal to Saudi Arabia get out of Yemen. And thank you if you ever clarified.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead. But we have very short time, if you don't mind, sir. We have very short amount of time, so I just want to make sure that everybody gets questions answered. If you don't mind, let us go ahead with the answer.
So I agree.
No, I don't need to answer. You can do it.
Okay.
Let me state my question to my brother on the other side. Okay, we are talking about the Christian war, and I believe Holy Christ, peace be upon him, he is a Muslim. In Quran, you read through chapter of Maryam, through all of the chapters, many references to Christ, and you read it, and I know you did. But what about the majority of the Christians, besides the Zionist Christians? What about the Catholics? What do they say about the same subject of Zionism? You did not clarify that. And Scott, thank you for bringing the situation that you said that Russia is for, anybody deciding that Russia is better than Russia.
Thank you very much. If we can briefly touch those 2 points, very briefly.
I never said that Iran has a large influence in Yemen, and Iran doesn't have any forces in Yemen to lead Yemen. The war was started by Saudi Arabia with the United Arab Emirates and many other countries. The bombs that fell on Yemen were Saudi Arabia bombs with US support. And so a lot of people say Iran has an influence. Iran has an influence as long as Ansarullah and their partners agree to it. But they can never dictate what Ansar Allah should do. Actually, we know for a fact that when Iran at some point in time gave money to Ansar Allah in 2009 for building some of the destruction that happened in the last war, they returned it to Iran and refused to take it.
Any ladies who have any questions, I just want to go back and forth.
Yeah. Answering your question, I agree with you. We have right now a new organization called PICA, Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace. Our goal is to go to the main line and everyone that invite us to share our story. As we share our story, we share, of course, the Palestinian story. You are on target. The Catholics, may God forgive them, they are 70 million in America. So we need to go to every bishop and tell them, I wish the Catholic Palestinian bishops will retire and come and go to the diocese. As a Presbyterian, I did my homework, and the Presbyterian Church General Assembly last year already made a point that Israel is practicing an apartheid system against the Palestinian people. So the reason for that, because the Presbyterians have been there for 200 years. They arrived in Beirut 1823, and now 2023 is 200 years. And so we focus on issues of justice a lot. And in Egypt, we have like 1 million Presbyterians. So we are educating the Presbyterian Church in a very systematic way how to be advocate for justice. But I agree with you.
Anybody else?
There's a question. Okay, go ahead.
I have a question for you. So the stated goals of the military operation in Ukraine were demilitarization and denazification. 1 year on, the Nazi regime is still in power, and Ukraine seems to be getting more and more weapons like F-16s and Patriot missiles. So how far do you think Russia has gone in terms of achieving these stated goals? Although it doesn't seem a lot, but is it getting closer to the goal, or is it goal getting further away? And then on the same note, are we closer to a nuclear conflict as compared to, let's say, a year ago, or do you think we are getting further away?
Thank you for the question. Look, anybody who studied conflict knows that some great philosophers in time, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, they all say that war is an extension of politics by other means. Meaning that you can't just focus on the military aspect, there's a political aspect to conflict as well. And I think when we take a look at Russia's approach to this conflict, it is a very politicized approach to this conflict. I spoke of Russia's desire to get a negotiated settlement early on. Why would Russia sit down in Istanbul and sign a peace treaty on 1 April 2022 if their objective was denazification? Because had they signed that, there would not have been denazification in Ukraine. So we have to be careful when we hear the Russian government say, our goal is denazification, because that's a statement where they have not said how they're going to accomplish it. I just spent a month in Russia, and people keep asking me, an American, how is Russia going to win this war? Don't ask me, ask the Russian government. What does Russia mean by denazification? What does Russia mean by demilitarization? Does it mean the destruction of the Ukrainian army? Does it mean the removal of all NATO influence? That's what it seems to mean to me, but then when I listened to President Putin's presentation back in, I think, February, he gave a speech where he said, our goal in Ukraine, our goal at this point in time, is the economic and social stabilization and revitalization of the Russian territories. That means Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Crimea. It doesn't mean Odessa, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, and other Russian territories. So the Russian government appears to be willing to settle for a peace that is limited to those territories that they have incorporated. They are not seeking additional territories. But how do you square that with denazification? Because denazification to me means just that, to get rid of the ideology of Stepan Bandera that has infected the current Ukrainian government. And if you don't, it resides like a cancer on your border and causing permanent problems, because the West will never divorce itself from supporting that. So the Russian government has not done a very good job at defining what victory is. And this is problematic politically, and it's problematic militarily, because I'll tell you as a military professional, if I'm going to lead Marines into combat, I have to tell my Marines what they are fighting for, what their objectives are, what they're going to die for. And right now you have Russian soldiers in Ukraine who believe that they are there and they don't know why they're there. They don't know why they're on the front line. If they were told to go to Kiev, they would understand that. But instead they're told to sit in the trench and die, and they don't understand that. The Russian government has to do a better job. It hasn't done a sufficient job in defining what it wants in terms of victory. It says one thing, but it doesn't put anything else up there. Now, the question about nuclear war, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be as blunt as possible. I'm a big advocate of no nuclear weapons. Why? Because if you use one, we all die, because it won't stop. There's no such thing as limited nuclear war. Nuclear deterrence is a concept that has a fatal flaw, because if it fails, we all die. How close are we to nuclear war? The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has put up something called the nuclear doomsday clock, and they've been moving that hand back and forth political times. I always say that that's a joke. As long as there's nuclear weapons, we are 0.001 second away from global annihilation, because it only takes one mistake, one miscalculation, one misunderstanding. The first time somebody doesn't get it right, we all die, it all goes wrong. So I think we've become too lax on the issue of nuclear weapons and non-proliferation. Nuclear military technology is a cancer for the world. And as long as the nations have these weapons, there's a temptation to use these weapons. And we have to eliminate these weapons so that they're never used.
Thank you very much. Maulana has a question. And then after that, I have a bunch of questions from Slido. People have posted. I'm going to ask one question from there, and that'll be the end of the program. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, very much, Scott Ritter, for your beautiful talk and beautiful analysis. I have two questions. We are hearing so much about the controversy about the supply of the F-16 fighting Falcons to Ukraine. And so my first question is that, is there a military landing strip surviving in Ukraine where the F-16s might land or not? That's the first question. And if there is no landing strip, how would a supply, if it takes place, how would the supply end up with when there is no landing strip operational? The second question is about, we heard in the news about the Russian Kinzhal missile, hypersonic missile destroying the US Patriot defense system. Is that correct?
On the Patriot system, it appears that the Kinzhal missile penetrated the defense barrier. It struck something. What it struck, we don't know. But apparently damage was done. The bottom line is this, and I've said it all along. I fought in the first Gulf War, and I was a direct participant in several aspects of that war, including the anti-Scud campaign. And I know for a fact that we didn't shoot down a single Scud missile during the war, because the Patriot missile is overly complicated. It doesn't perform to the way that it's proclaimed to perform. That was true in 1991, and it's true today. The Patriot system that's deployed in Ukraine cannot stop the most sophisticated Russian weapons, and the Kinzhal penetration proved that. On the F-16, I'll answer it this way. The Ukrainians today continue to fly Su-25, MiG-29, and Su-27 aircraft from various locations inside Ukraine. Some of these are improvised airfields where the F-16 cannot operate. Some are airfields where the F-16 could operate. So in theory, the F-16, if provided to Ukraine, would be able to take off and land from areas where current Ukrainian fighters do take off and land. The F-16 is a 40-year-old system. The Ukrainians will not be getting new systems. The provision of the F-16, if it happens, will not change the outcome of this conflict whatsoever.
Thank you very much. And this is the last question from Slido, and it is for Reverend as such. Do you think that the pro-Palestinian supporters or the children who were raised in the Jewish state after 1947 care about Palestine at all, or they have been led by their parents to just hate the Palestinians as such? And will there be a multicultural, is there any hope for a multicultural society in a one-state solution?
Yeah, I think we need three movements. One, we need the Israeli Jewish left and peace camp to grow. We need American Jews to advocate for, and then we need the U.S. government to believe in that. If they don't, then I don't think that will work. But the issue is that right now, the first intifada, the second intifada, that means the uprising against, the occupation is so brutal. They control the life of every Palestinian. That means if you are born in 1967, today you are a 55-year-old man or woman, no nothing but a brutal occupation. And there is not one family in the West Bank and in Gaza that does not have a relative in Israeli prison. So to me, there are two things. When you find 5 Israeli soldiers running after a 10-year-old Palestinian kid, that is a sick scene. You train soldiers to protect you. You don't train soldiers to run in Houston after a 10-year-old kid. So something, I think we need to start to be more blunt. You know, the one that really is excellent is Gideon Lake. He is a journalist. He writes in Haaretz. He said to Americans, if you really love Israel, you need to do one for the other. He says, if your father or your uncle is a drunk and continues drinking, what he wants from you? Money. But if you are wise, you tell him you need rehabilitation. If you really love him, for rehabilitation. We need tough talk with Israel to say, if you want to stay there, you need to coexist with Palestinians. Israel can make peace with Egypt, with Jordan, and any other country, but unless they are reconciled with the Palestinians, the deal is not going to work. You know, like the problem is between me and Scott, and then Sister Aisha, make peace between you and you. The real problem is between us. So unless we reconcile an Israeli Jew to a Palestinian Arab, and that only can happen basically with a constitution that make them equal. You know, I say to people, look, and that's, American open their eyes. I say, if you take the American Constitution and put it in the state of Israel, it will blow into pieces. The state of Israel cannot accept the U.S. Constitution. So I think we need to do a lot of homework with our Jewish brothers and sisters that we work with, and we need to start doing something to elect new congresspeople and senators that advocate for justice for the Palestinians. And that only happens if we get involved in our American political system.
Thank you very much, and with that, we end the town hall today. And
Scott,
I would like you to. Scott, please go ahead.
39 seconds.
39 seconds. I just want to say something really quick, just as somebody who is different than everybody in this room, probably, from my background, etc. You said something early on that resonated. You said that the Israelis do a very good job of selling the Israeli narrative, and that the Palestinians do a horrible job. But it's not the Palestinians' fault. it's my fault. And the reason why I say that is I grew up in the American education system. I studied the Arab-Israeli conflict, etc. I spent from 1994 until 1998 many, many months in Israel working with the Israeli government on the Iraq issue. When I went to Israel, I was readily able to accept the Israeli narrative. Everything they told me, everything I had learned was apparent before me. It wasn't until I went to Jordan and met with Ali Shikri, who is the advisor to the King of Jordan. We were talking on a separate issue, but he said, Scott, when you go back to Israel, go to Jaffa, and he wanted me to see a building. It was his father's home. The building was right next to a restaurant that I always used to go to and eat. I had been to Jaffa many times. I didn't view it as anything other than what it was presented to me. But I went there and I saw the home, and suddenly I started seeing things. Palestinians. They were there the whole time, and I never saw them. I ignored them. They didn't exist. And the more I looked, the more I saw, the more I realized that the Israeli narrative was a lie. A vicious lie designed to keep people down. But here's the problem. If you're going to work with Jewish Americans,
खाना खोले हुए आधा घंटा हो गया और वो फिर नमाज का टाइम हो रहा है
getting the message to the right people. You got to get it to mainstream America. You have to teach Americans like me that when they look at Israel, they don't see the Israeli narrative, they see the truth. They see the Palestinian people. You speak of equality, but there is no equality if all we see is 7 million Jews. We don't see the 7 million Palestinians, and this is a problem that has to be solved if you're going to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish, which I want you to accomplish.
Okay. That's a great way to end today's program. Let us recite our salawat for the help of these three incredible speakers and their families. I would like to invite Hujjatul Islam, Maulana Abbas Elia, to come and give a gift of our appreciation to the three panelists.
First of all, I feel obliged on behalf of Muslim Congress of North America to thank the honorable guests, Mr. Scott Ritter, Sister Aisha, and Brother Akil, all of them, mashallah, great personalities, giving us very insightful talk. We are, very much thankful for your presence, sir, and we appreciate you sharing your ideas with us. So this is just a small token of appreciation we would like to give to each one of you. First of all, I would like to invite Sister Aisha.
Oh, I got it. You can use it.
One is for Brother Akil Abu Fahad.
That was fantastic. It was very worked out very fantastic. Mashallah. Very good. Thank you very much.
One for you.
A plot for our Honorable Dr. Ali Raza Musli. He's a cardiologist. But when I come to the town hall and listen to the way he presents us so nicely, he looks like a PhD in public relations or political science or something. MashaAllah, let's welcome Dr. Ali Musli with another salawat.
Thank you very much. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.